We're in for a wild night.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 87 of Born to be Wild, a Wild exclusive Hearthstone podcast where we have fun hanging out with friends, talking about the Wild format of Hearthstone and spotlighting members of the Wild community. I am your host, as always, Nate Wolf. It is great to be back on this beautiful rainy Friday evening here in Portland, Oregon. Had a great time this past week with the new cards, trying out some new decks, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited for tonight's show. And of course, am joined by two of my favorite people. Hydra, welcome back. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome, coming at you guys from the greater Vancouver area. I, too, have been excited to play with some new stuff. Unfortunately, when there's a new rewards track, it sort of like gets me going again on playing on the 3 accounts. I have to do it because
you kicked that.
I did only because I got to level 100 and I felt confident that I was okay, and then I stopped. But now there's all these free things, so I got to do it. So that's what I've been doing. But I'm super excited for tonight's show, and yeah, it's just we got some cool topics to talk about tonight. One specific topic that we'll get to in a little bit, but I'm doing great.
Awesome. And of course, Electric Sheep City, welcome back. It's great to see you. How you doing tonight?
Howdy, friends. I am great, and greetings from hot and muggy Southeast Texas. I have had a really fun week in the first week of the expansion. Nate knows this in particular because he and I made a bet before the expansion dropped whether or not I could hit Legend, the deck featuring Murabi. So the bet is if I hit it with a deck featuring Murabi, then Nate has to craft Murabi in gold. And if I don't by the season ends, then I have to craft Murabi in gold. So there are stakes there.
And to be clear, this can't just be like an aggressive Murloc shaman or something with Murabi thrown in. This has to be focused on Murabi, correct?
Yeah, not necessarily focused, like
but some synergy, you know.
But some synergies. Yeah.
Some synergies, yeah.
Yeah, it can't just be like you said, Murloc deck or, even shaman, because Murabi is even, anything like that. It has to actually make sense for Murabi to be in there. So I've been playing some fun things. Ooh,
yeah.
Murabi
I got a text this morning at 7:00 that said, "I'm at Diamond 2. You better get your dust ready."
Yeah, I actually made it all the way up to Diamond 1 at one point before falling back down. I think I'm like back to Diamond 3, Diamond 4 again, but that part of the ladder, it goes up and down. So
of course.
I'll continue refining as the meta shakes out.
You will be my hero if you do this.
I'm getting my dust ready. I'll reserve some for when this happens. So, anyways, hey, apologies. I was just gonna say, let us not forget the fourth member of our cast tonight. I'm very excited to be joined by our good friend and resident Loremaster Goliath the Dwarf. Welcome back to the show.
Pleasure as always. I'm ready to lay down some lore with the latest set, and I love coming on the show. I love talking about this stuff. I'm coming to you guys from the northeastern region of Iowa, where we're kind of between weather-wise what everybody else has. It's like wintry, but there's been no snow yet, which I personally like because it gets in the way of things, but it's not as pretty, and it does look a little strange. Everyone's Christmas lights out when there's not the typical white background. So I'm sure we might get our first snowfall tonight if the weather report holds true, but we all know how reliable those can be.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Goliath. We're excited to learn some lore. But before we go into that aspect, for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome aboard. I'm going to briefly explain how the show works. So we record this podcast live every Friday evening at twitch.tv/borntobewildhs. And the video version of the podcast is then posted on YouTube the very next day. Audio versions, of course, are distributed to all podcast apps, typically the very next day as well. So however you're watching, listening, absorbing via osmosis this podcast today, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
you.
Absolutely. And just a real quick housekeeping before we get to the main topic of the show, I did want to say a big thank you to Shokunin and all of the patrons of our show. Your support means the world to us. And if you enjoy this content, please subscribe, comment on the YouTube video, as it helps us a ton with the analytics. Another easy way to support the show is to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or your podcast platform of choice, as that helps other people to find the show. If you're watching this live on Twitch, we do have some great emotes that you can unlock by subscribing to the channel, which you can do for free if you have Amazon Prime. And finally, if you are interested in supporting the show, you can join our Patreon for some great bonus content for as little as $1 a month. We have been adding some free content. In fact, we added some over the past week, and some more changes in store for the Patreon. Lastly, if you're interested in interacting with us personally, please join our Discord. It's a free and amazing online community of friends that we have made all across the world with people who love talking about Wild Hearthstone. So yeah, links to all of this stuff and more can be found at our website, which is www.borntobewildhs.com. And one final thing that I wanted to throw out there, special for this week, a quick plug for the website. If you're looking for wild decks to play that feature cards from the new expansion, I think we saw a bunch of complaints day one. You know, all I'm seeing is Pirate Warrior and Quest Hunter. So if you're looking for decks that are featuring cards from the new set, go to our website. There's a page for deck lists. We have double checked that all of these decks feature cards from the new set. They're listed on the website. Creators are credited. There's links to the original source. There's deck codes that you can copy and paste. And we've had a lot of fun kind of assembling that and trying new decks and stuff. So yeah. Anyways, that's the housekeeping plug. Let me pass things over to Hydra to talk a little bit about the news for this week.
So yeah, in the Hearthstone news this week, the new expansion has launched. Fractured and Alterac is out, and hopefully you guys are all enjoying the different cards, the different decks. Like Nate said, come check out the website and see what you can possibly be playing. A quick couple things that we wanted to talk about is, if you've cracked a bunch, you know how we got this duplicate protection and everything, but even with that, you end up with all these extra commons and rares and possibly even rarer cards. But you don't want to, it's really tempting just to hit that mass disenchant button. You can see down in the bottom corner, you can get all this extra dust. You can craft maybe a legendary that you're missing or whatever. We just want to urge you to maybe hold off, unless you just want it, but hold off. Just do it, because a lot of these cards nowadays in Hearthstone get nerfed quite quickly after the expansion is launched. And I've got a bit of a feeling, since there's holidays coming up, people at Blizzard are going to be taking some time off. They might want to release a couple nerfs, possibly even before the holidays, right? So if you can, hold off, don't hit that disenchant button, because you could have 11 copies of something and you could get full dust refunds for all of that card. So don't hit the button, just hold off. And the same sort of applies for if you want to craft cards, right? So the meta is still forming. Cards have not been out for very long, just a few days. So if you can, hold off as well. There could be cards that are just hype right now, and it could be a waste of your dust.
I'm telling y'all, no. Don't listen to Hydra. Craft a golden Murabi right now. I'm telling you.
Not dust bait whatsoever.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
From this expansion.
It's nice on the frozen throne.
I'm sorry.
But it finally has synergy.
Yeah.
It took, what? Was that like 2016, 2017? How many years did it take? 5 years for some synergy?
It's been a while.
So that was the year of the mammoth. We've had, let's see, Raven, Dragon, Phoenix, and 4 years.
Yeah, there we go. Finally, some free shaman. But yeah, just wait, hold off a little bit, see how the meta shakes out. Unless you're a whale and you're just gonna get everything anyway. But other than that, I would hold off. Another note: we've been seeing some people complaining that they are packing the 2 free legendaries. You get to pick the Horde or the Alliance. So Drekthar and Vandar, and you got to choose one. And I noticed even myself when I went to go, I didn't open Vandar. I picked Drekthar. I didn't open it, but I noticed I could craft it. And I thought to myself, why would I craft this card if, we're going to get it for free anyway. It didn't make sense. And then Nate told me that he actually packed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that seemed a little strange. So some people have been voicing their concerns over this, and we actually heard back about it. So I'm just going to read a little quote from Blizzard. They stated that the team has decided to extend the start of rewards track refund logic to also apply Vandar and Drekthar. Though these cards do not meet the circumstances we normally use to apply refund logic, we have heard your feedback that an exception in this instance will make for a better play experience for many players. The decision to add this refund logic was finalized after this hotfix was put together, so the refund period has not yet been enabled. We will update our messaging once that refund period has started. After that refund period goes live, players who already disenchanted Drekthar or Vandar will automatically receive additional dust to make up for not receiving the full value.
Nice.
So they said they will post an update when there is more information. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like it too. And the logic makes sense. I was reading, Celestalon posted a whole thread of tweets earlier this evening that Sheep shared, I believe, in the Discord. And I think it was interesting. Their rationale is like, look, if you got the card on day one, like right now with Korak the Blood Rager, that card is eligible for full dust refund because that's our diamond legendary for the set, and you can unlock it like at level 1. And so it makes sense that, hey, if you pack the normal version, you can dust it for full value. And their thought process, well, you can unlock these, but you have to go through this whole legendary quest chain or of obtaining, 7,200 honor points. And they didn't expect people to be rushing through and being able to unlock them quite that quickly. And so that's how, like, the logic doesn't apply, but it's really awesome that they're doing it anyways, because yeah, I mean, if you're going to get it gold, why would you want the non-gold? And if I'm going to get it gold within a couple of weeks or whatever, a short period of time. So anyways, big applause for the team there. I'm very happy about it.
Hooray!
Yeah.
I feel these days they really are listening to a lot of our feedback, and I think that's absolutely great.
It was fast too, because they just sent over the feedback like a couple of days ago, and I wasn't like, I had to change the show graphics because I had it all prepped for we've sent along your feedback to change to we've accepted your feedback and we've decided to do this. I'm like, wow, that was fast. Okay. So yeah,
that's pretty much it that we have for news this evening, because we do have a main topic. That's why we have our wonderful Goliath the Dwarf here. So I'm going to pass it off to Nate to take us into the main topic of the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited to jump into this tonight. So tonight's main topic is the lore of Fractured in Alterac, Part 1. So Alterac Valley has a lot going on, so we're going to break this up into 2 episodes in order to make sure that we give all parts of the story their due. So today we're going to be talking about the 2 warring factions in Alterac Valley, the Frostwolf Orcs and the Stormpike Dwarves. And next time we'll talk about Alterac Valley itself and take a look at some of the locations and the legendary minions in the set. That being said, there are 2 legendary minions in this set that don't really fit well lore-wise with the rest of the other legendaries, so those 2 we're going to cover independently. Those 2 are the Paladin legendary Sidon the Scarlet and the Demon Hunter legendary Karia Felsoul. So for those of you who are watching, we'll be talking about Sidon the Scarlet tonight after the main show here on Twitch, and then covering the other one in the near future. So, and then for those of you listening to the audio version of this podcast or watching this on YouTube, those characters will be broken into their own little mini episodes and posted to YouTube for you to check out separately. The easiest way to find that content is just to visit our website again, which is borntobewildhs.com, and we'll have links posted there. Okay, that is enough from me. Let me pass the mic over to Goliath. I'm so excited to hear the story for tonight.
Oh, absolutely. As I always love coming here. I always love telling the stories. And this is one that it's, on one hand, it's very specific towards a certain couple factions right here, but we're also going to touch on filling in a couple of pieces with some of the larger story that it's connected to, because while the factions themselves, we got 2 clans of a race. We got Stormpike clan of the Dwarves and the Frostwolf clan of the Orcs. Their stories are connected very much with that of the rest of their people. We have a lot more that we're going to talk about with the orcs than the dwarves. Not that there's any bias here. Obviously, if there were, I would be in favor of the dwarves. There's no question about that. But it's just a matter of the story material that we've been given to work with. So just a heads up about that. So we are going to start just by talking a little bit about what Alterac Valley is, right, Nate?
Yeah.
Just kind of setting the stage here.
Yes.
So essentially, Alterac Valley is, well, a big snowy valley in the Alterac mountain range. And it is one of the most famous original, what you call a battleground in the game World of Warcraft. Basically, this very large instance player versus player zone where you have a goal largely to get in and conquer the opponent's fortress. But there's a whole lot of complex stuff in it, and we'll be getting a lot more into that in part 2 because there are many of the game mechanics and characters in it that they turned into Hearthstone mechanics and legendary characters, so that's not our focus today. But the important thing to understand is that this is something that was like really, really big throughout WoW's history, kind of like right from the front in the PvP area. And so you got a lot of people who become very invested in supporting either the Stormpikes, if you are Alliance, or the Frostwolves, if you are the Horde. And today we're going to be talking about how both of those people got there and why they're even fighting in the first place. So we are going to get started by talking about the Frostwolves. And so the Frostwolves, like all orcs, are not native to the world of Azeroth. They originated on another world called Draenor. If you remember anything about way back when we covered the lore of Outland, back in the Ashes to Outland expansion, that's like a whole other world that had its own evolution and it's almost its own different types of magic and the way that races developed and stuff. But the orcs were basically this race that evolved, or kind of almost de-evolved from previous races like ogres into a very savage world that's very fight to survive type of lifestyle that they have to live in, and they form all these different clans. And one of these clans is the Frostwolf clan. And that, if Frostwolf sounds familiar to you guys at all, we have had a couple cards that right from the start of Hearthstone that had Frostwolf in them. We have Frostwolf Grunt and Frostwolf Warlord. Now, all this time later, you're finally going to get to know what these guys are about. Why do they have the word Frostwolf in them?
And do the Frostwolves really like Silverhand recruits? Because Frostwolf Warlord certainly does.
Not particularly. In fact, there's no such thing as an orcish paladin in the lore so far. At least, who knows what they'll come up with.
Hey, we got
someday.
a demon one.
That's a very specific story of that. We're not going down that tangent.
Different story for a different day.
Yes. But essentially, so the Frostwolves are, well really the origin behind their name isn't a huge mind puzzle. They got their name because they were able to, as a clan, develop a close bond with Frostwolves, like snowy wolves who live in a snowy area. Now, this isn't Alterac Valley. That's a different snowy area they're going to get to later on in the story. On their home world of Draenor, they lived in a place called Frostfire Ridge. So this is basically a mixture of just like huge snowy tundra landscape with tons of volcanoes in it as well. It's a rather inhospitable place, but they managed to get along pretty well. Like I said, orcs are survivors by the very nature. It's the world that they came to be in the first place. And so the Frostwolves are one of the smaller orc clans, really. Only like less than 100 members overall, and that's small compared to some of the others. They're more minor, but they ended up playing pretty major roles in the history of the orcish race because, well, frankly, they are the reason that Rexar is a character in Hearthstone. Yeah, so does anyone remember what Rexar is. He's not an orc. Well, he's a half orc. The other half is ogre. Is a half. So if you remember the card in Mercenaries, he's labeled as half orc. The official name for his race is called a Machnathal, and they were actually bred as a slave race by the Ogre Empire, who were very cruel and domineering of the world and loved to enslave war. And so they had forced breeding programs, like this is pretty nasty stuff here, where they forced offspring between orcs and ogres, and so that they could get being with the brawn of the ogre, but the smarts of the orc. And then eventually they unleashed them on the clans who lived in Frostfire Ridge, including the Frostwolves, and the leaders of the Frostwolves ended up fighting against them. But then once they realized that, oh, these guys don't actually want to help the ogres are absolutely horrible to them, they freed them, and Leorox was the leader, so Beastmaster Leorox from Ashes to Outland, and then they all allied together and overthrew the ogres, and Rexar is Leorox's son, so if it weren't for the Frostwolf clan, Rexar wouldn't be a thing, which I think that's a really cool connection there. And so the leader of the Frostwolves is an orc by the name of Duratan, and his wife's name is Draka, and they are very key to the story here because Duratan was a really smart guy who was able to sense when, like, he could smell a rat a lot better than most of the other orcish clans could, which is going to come in really handy when Gul'dan comes along. Before we get into that, does anyone have any clarifying questions?
Not now.
All right,
No,
everyone
but
on board so far? Gotcha.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear what's coming next.
I guess
Okay.
I will do a brief aside that if you watch the Warcraft movie, you get a little piece of this, at least in terms of Duratan. It's kind of fun.
Right. Now, the movie does go differently. They do a slightly different version of the story than the official game lore. So it's kind of alternate universe version. Like I said, I love the movie. The movie's what got me into all this in the first place. But yeah, so you can go watch the movie and get a sense of all this. You get a real sense of Duratan's character and stuff. But there will be major differences between that and what I'm going to be telling you here. So just a heads up if that's anyone wants to go see the movie. So, Gul'dan was the first orcish warlock. He was an outcast who made a pact with the demons of the Burning Legion that they would give him lots of power and, like, no one would ever toss him aside again or anything. In exchange, that he would help them enslave the entire orcish race. He didn't think twice about it. He had no problems. And so, this is essentially, he carried out what I can only compare to a series of political manipulations, in a sense, akin to that of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, when he managed to, like, manipulate Anakin into Darth Vader and turn the Republic into an empire. We're talking that level of subterfuge and manipulation in order to corrupt an entire race here. We don't have time to get into all of the steps that he did in order to accomplish that, but one of the key things was that he manipulated the shaman of the orcish clans, including a very respected one named Ner'zhul, who was, like, officially his teacher. He managed to worm his way into the apprenticeship there in order to gain a respected position and pretend that he was a shaman instead of a warlock. And basically what Gul'dan did was he got the elements to stop responding to the shaman. And that was a huge part of orcish culture, and so it's a major disaster for them. And also, he managed to convince the orcs which were the other race, they had crash landed in a spaceship years ago and were kind of peacefully cohabiting, but also just keeping to themselves. And that's a whole other story, characters like Prophet Velen and stuff. But basically, things were going along pretty well, a relatively peaceful coexistence. But Gul'dan managed to manipulate everyone into thinking, okay, the reason that the shamans aren't hearing the elements is because of the Dread Eye. Like, they want to destroy us, and they did something that stopped all this. And so he managed to manipulate everyone into thinking that they needed to unite all of the different orcish clans into a single horde under the first war chief, Blackhand, who was the chieftain of a clan called the Black Rocks and was just like a really nasty guy to put in charge, but he was a good puppet. Gul'dan would have taken care of himself, but he had like a negative charisma score, frankly, and so he wouldn't be. Blackhand was very brutal, but he had a bit more charisma, and so they put him in charge.
That's Rend Blackhand?
Nah, it's
No,
it's Ren's
Ren-
dad. Yeah.
This is just.
Oh, it's his dad.
This guy has no first name. He is only Blackhand.
Just
Rend
Blackhand.
and Main Blackhand are his sons.
Okay.
Which gives you a sense of what kind of person he was that he named his kids Rend and Maim. I'm just saying.
So you said that Blackhand is from the Black Rock. I'm assuming that they came from a certain mountain.
Close.
Okay.
Black Rock Mountain is actually a mountain in Azeroth that coincidentally has the same name. The Black Rock clan was named for a rare ore that they mourned that they happened to call Black Rock, but coincidentally, aka some of this stuff was made up in the lore late. Way after they came over to Azeroth, some of them ended up coincidentally settling in Black Rock Mountain, like Ren and Main Blackhands ended up doing that. And we're already getting on a tangent here, but so, like, they are not from Black Rock Mountain. Some of them kind of ended up at Black Rock Mountain through a coincidence, aka just the way that what happens when you are improvising and adding on to elements of a story for 25 years.
Retconning, got it.
Yes, exactly. But basically, the important part for our story here is that, so, Gul'dan managed to get, Ner'zhul to organize this really big meeting of all the clans here and explain the situation to them, and Durotan was the only one who really smelled that there was something fishy going on here and didn't jump on with it all. He did have to make concessions because he knew that there would be very strong consequences for being the lone voice of dissent. Because remember, they're a small clan. He may be the chief, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not very much power, and he doesn't want all of his people punished for refusing to bend the knee. So he makes some concessions. He allows his clan to join this new horde that's forming, and he even allows Gul'dan's warlocks to come and start infusing some of his members with this new fell magic that they've discovered. No one really knows what it is. And what it does is it kind of prematurely ages them up and empowers them a bit into stronger warriors so that they can all go and kill the Draenei because, they're totally the ones who are responsible for all of this. I guarantee you guys, it's not this new foul magic or the sinister green-skinned warlock guy here. No, it's the Draenei who are the problems here, and we need to wipe them all out.
Convenient scapegoat.
Yes, exactly. It was all about the scapegoating. Gul'dan just goes and causes a ton of problems and blames it all on the Draenei to convince the orcs to go and kill them all. And the night before they launched their really big raid on the Draenei's capital of Shattrath City, Gul'dan holds a famous ritual that's very key to the story of World of Warcraft, where they decide that this whole just infusing some fell magic into orc warriors isn't enough. We need to fully bind them to the Legion's will, turn them into blood-crazed berserkers who can't even disobey or whatnot. And so by doing that, he gets them to accept drinking demon blood, the blood of the Pit Lord Manaroth, who we don't have as a regular Hearthstone card yet, but do have as a mercenary now. So at least we get to see him in the game in that way, which I really like. And so by drinking this demon blood, which I'm certain tastes really, really bad.
Looks so tasty.
Looks like an ecto cooler.
It does.
Ecto cooler.
But by doing it, like it increases their strength and power. It's like super magic steroids, but also, you know, it corrupts them. It's what turns their skin green. That's why orcs are green, because beforehand they had various different shades of brown and black and gray and all of that. That's another reason the Black Rocks had their name. They were the darker skinned orcs of a black color that happened to match the rock that they dug up. But at any rate, Durotan, this was the one point where he just outright refused. Ner'zhul had actually learned what Gul'dan was up to and been imprisoned and enslaved by him, and was feeling really bad at having helped in the manipulation of all of the orcs. But he managed to smuggle out a message to Durotan, because he knew Durotan was the only one who was hesitant about all this stuff. And he said, do not listen to what Gul'dan says at the meeting tonight. If you do, then your entire clan is doomed forever. And so this is one he refuses. The Demon Blood, he forbids any of the Frostwolves from drinking it. And Gul'dan is absolutely livid at this point, but like he can't risk creating a divide here by killing Durotan, because it's the night right before their big battle. He needs everybody focused and united and can't cause a scene, so he lets him live. But like, you know, there's he wants to find ways to get back at this guy at some point. And then the war against the Draenei happens, and really once they drink the demon blood and are these crazed berserkers who have this constant thirst for violence, they can't really turn it off. And so they just kind of go around destroying everything else on Draenor. Any race that gets in their way, the fell magic ends up turning the entire world into a wasteland. And they are on really hard times right now. Durotan keeps trying to say, we need to stop with this fell magic stuff right here. Look at what it's doing. It's completely destroying our world, destroying our honorable culture, and Black-Handed Gul'dan are just even more ticked off at him for doing that. And
The problem is that we haven't had enough fell magic.
I don't know if they specifically said that, but I would not be at all surprised. We can go ahead and headcanon that, and there will be no contradictions as far as I'm aware. But it's at this point that we get the famed Dark Portal that Gul'dan built with the Medivh, the Guardian Medivh, who possessed, of course, by the spirit of Sargeras, and wanted to bring the orcs over to Azeroth in order to conquer it and weaken it for an invasion by the Burning Legion. And so all the orc clans, they just, you know, file in, join the army to go over and conquer the new world. But well, almost all of them. Some of them are too crazy and savage, and they're left behind until everything is taken care of. And the home world is the orcs. But Durotan, like, he doesn't want to do this, but he's like, our world is dying. We have literally no choice. Sure, we're going to go ahead and join you. He also has just recently learned that Draka is pregnant. And so that gives that big sense that, okay, I'm going to have a kid here. I don't want my kid growing up in this dying world. And so, yeah, once again, he doesn't want to capitulate to the demands of the Horde, but he doesn't really feel that he has much of a choice. And so the Frostwolves join. However, shortly after they cross over, Gul'dan kind of pulls him aside and says, hey, so you are exiled now. I want nothing to do with you. You will never have contact with another orc, another member of the Horde again. You are out of here, or I will kill you all. Again, it's kind of most, he would have just killed him, but, you know, he didn't want to create a scene and cause questioning in his leadership. And so, like, he's given the opportunity. And again, with the motivation that I've got a pregnant wife and a baby on the way, Durotan is, okay, we'll opt for the exile here. And that is why they end up settling in a place so far away from any of the other orcs in the Horde, which is going to bring us up to Alterac here. But again, let's take another pit stop and clarifying questions that we need to catch up at this point. Nope, everyone's good.
A lot of questions, but I think we go down a giant rabbit hole. Like maybe
Yeah.
for another day. Like we talked about it before, and I'd love to talk about it again. But just Medivh in general, and the whole history there, and his possession, and the Dark Portal, and all this stuff. But like,
We're gonna have to have a whole episode about Medivh at some point. He
Absolutely.
was a very key with the story and kind of complex, really.
yeah,
That would be amazing. I would love that.
Check out future lore episodes for more information.
Yes. So it's at this point that we're going to get to one of our key legendary cards of the set, Drekthar, because this is where he really has his shining moment. Drekthar was like the head shaman for the Frostwolf clan, like, very old, very respected, had a strong connection with the elements. But like many shaman, when the elements stopped working, he'd gone along with Gul'dan and accepted this new fel power because, well, what choice do we have? This is the new cool thing, and the old stuff isn't available anymore, so we're gonna go with this. But as it turned out, not only did Draenor have elemental spirits, but Azeroth had its own elemental spirits, which of course we already know. How many times has Ragnaros been made into a card?
not enough. That's the answer.
Just
But-
like 20 more times, please.
But so it was at this point, like during the period of exile, that Drekthar heard, like he could sense elemental spirits again, that he couldn't for so long. And I want to emphasize here that Drekthar is one of the oldest orcs in the story, period, because he's already old and all this stuff goes on. And so far, he has survived up through the current story. Eventually gets to the point where he is such like the rare old elderly orc, which most of them die in combat, so this is really rare, that the orcs basically invents wheelchairs just for him. He's pushed around by his apprentice shaman in a wheelchair, not at this point, but later on in like past all the Alterac stuff, really. But yeah, this is I can't imagine what it would be like if we had wheelchair Drekthar as a card or something.
That'd be hilarious. I saw it when I was pulling up the artwork for this, and I was like, what? Because like the artwork here, he looks all buff and huge and ferocious, and then like there's some artwork of him, and he's like this old dude in a wheelchair, and it's so funny.
Well, in this, what we're seeing him right now with the card, he's maybe more in, I don't know, let's say 60s or 70s. The wheelchair, he's like in his 90s or 100s or something. I'd have to double check what his exact ages are at these points, but there's a lot of time that passes between this badass depiction that we have of him and I have to be pushed around in a wheelchair and everyone thinks I'm senile.
I desperately want to look like Drekthar whenever I'm in my 60s or 70s. Life goals.
Nate, in that picture with the wheelchair, was there a flame waker and a sorcerer's apprentice pushing the wheelchair?
I can Photoshop it.
That would be fun. Do it sometime if you have the free time. I want to see that.
That's great.
But yeah, so at any rate, it was at this point, upon hearing and reconnecting with the elemental spirits of Azeroth, that Drekthar kind of had, you might say like a big dramatic conversion, epiphany moment, where he immediately gave up all the fel magic and returned to the elements and the shamanism. And he asked the elements, okay, we've all been exiled here. Can you show us a place to live? And he essentially became kind of like Orc Moses, where he gets a divine apparition that is leading him to lead his clan to a sort of promised land of sorts, a place where they can go and live. And that place is Alterac Valley. It's a very snowy place. It's coincidentally, quite like the area that the Frostwolves originally came from, so they feel pretty at home, even though, again, it's not the easiest to survive here, but it's what they're accustomed to. And more importantly, it's a place where they can hide. Because not only do they have to make sure that they stay away from people like Gul'dan and other corrupt leadership members of the Horde here, but they have to stay away from every native of Azeroth as well, because it's not like the humans are going to see them and be like, oh, that's the clan that's not participating quite so much in the war that's trying to completely destroy us, so we'll leave them alone. No, they'd see there's orcs, humans barely know what orcs are at this point, they would attack them. But the elemental spirits managed to help them, guide them to avoid any encounters with the humans. And so they managed to get to Alterac Valley very safe and sound and just kind of start settling in. And it's pretty abandoned at this point. Dwarves aren't part of the story yet. The orcs kind of get to this area first. And it's at this point here, after settling in Alterac, that Duratan and Draka finally have their baby. And it's a very sweet moment until they realize that, oh, the baby's skin is green, and this fell curse has cursed us all for infinite generations. We have to figure out how to get the fel out of the orcs if we're going to want our son and all of our future descendants to be safe. So they, Duratan and Draka, take little baby, who they name Goel, and they leave the Frostwolves in Alterac Valley under the care of Drekthar to serve as their leader while they're gone, and go to make contact secretly with an old friend named Ogrim Doomhammer, who is the wielder of the Doomhammer, which is, that epic weapon that's been around in the game forever. And so that's where that gets its name, because it was wielded by a guy named Ogrim Doomhammer. Or you could argue that he got his name from wielding the weapon. It's not really quite sure whether the chicken or the egg came first here, honestly.
I will name my weapon Sheep City.
What kind of weapon would that be?
Shears.
It's a band hammer.
I love it. Someone get on fan art of that, please. So, at any rate, for some reason, they didn't leave their baby back in the care of the rest of the clan. They decide, okay, let's take our little infant son on this secret journey that we're completely risking our lives here to attempt to cure our entire race of evil man. They just bring him along, and that turns out to kind of be a mistake, because while Ogrim Doomhammer is very much on their side and wants to try to figure stuff out in order to purge the fel from the Orcish race and get Gul'dan and Blackhand out of power because they are just the worst, then he entrusts their safety, Duratan and Draka and Goel's safety, to some bodyguards of his to, okay, they're going to escort you back to Alterac Valley and going to keep you safe. Turns out those bodyguards were actually secretly loyal to Gul'dan the whole time, and they absolutely murder Duratan and Draka. And don't bother finishing off the baby because they'd rather just leave him to freeze. Yeah, really, really bad people. And so they just go, and it just so happens that after they're gone, a human hunting party led by a noble named Elidus Blackmore comes along and finds this strange little orcish baby and decides to pick him up, take him in, not out of a charitable, I'm running an orphanage for orcs here, but because he decides to raise this orc as a gladiator in order to line his own pockets from betting on the gladiatorial matches. And he names him Thrall. And this is Thrall's origin story right here. Thrall is a member of the Frostwolf clan, but growing up, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know what an orc is. He's the only orc that he has really ever seen, aside from the occasional one when he sees them in internment camps, because after all of the wars, the Burning Legion abandoned the orcs, and all of that crazed bloodlust that they had turned to lethargy, and they just didn't have the willpower to do anything, and so it was real easy to round up a bunch of them, just kind of put them in these internment camps. The Alliance didn't know what to do. Should we execute them? Should we keep them alive? That's more humane. And so they're just kind of in these camps for now. And so Thrall grows up in one of these, and he has no knowledge of orcish culture or his heritage or who he is. He just knows himself as the gladiator slave to Blackmore. But eventually, kind of turns out that raising and training this incredibly powerful being, because orcs just, they're by nature far more muscle bound than human, just have a natural, much higher strength stat racially. And it's he's trained that, but he's also educated, with books and everything. But Blackmore also still treats him absolutely horribly. And, like, that's not a good combination. Like, this guy's just an absolute idiot that you are raising the perfect weapon and doing, like, all that you can to make sure that he grows up to hate you. Like, naturally, Thrall escapes, he rebels, and, like, you know, he wants to get away from this guy.
Okay, perfect plan. Make the perfect weapon. Turn it against me. What could go wrong?
Yes, exactly. This guy's a complete moron, honestly, and a lot of other like nobles like in the human kingdoms know it, and like he's just one of those people who like has a position and there's not much that you can do about it because he has money and power, but nobody likes him at all.
So he's earned his reputation.
Yeah, pretty much. And so it's at this point, Thrall is, you know, he just escapes. And by coincidence, he happens to run into the Warsong clan who managed to not get put in internment camps, are just kind of roaming around. They happen to be run by Gromesh Helsk, who is, of course, you know, our original warrior legendary. And Gromesh instructs Thrall in, like, the first lessons of what it means to be an orc. But then he tells him, hey, so there's these Frostwolf clan that's up in the Alterac Mountains here. You really want to learn who you are, go and see them. And that's exactly what Thrall does. He goes up, he makes the journey, and that's where he discovers that, oh, turns out that this clan is his birthright, honestly, that he is the son of the former chieftain, and he becomes a student of Drekthar in learning the ways of shamanism. So the reason that Thrall is such a powerful shaman is because Drekthar was his teacher. And if you played through the Book of Heroes, Thrall's story, I think it's the second challenge where it's like Drekthar is teaching you lessons and mastering the elements and stuff. That's what that is representing at this point in the story.
Oh, that's really cool.
Cool. Because it's in Alterac Valley.
That's great. Yeah, I need to go replay it now. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so essentially, this is where Thrall stays for a while, and this is also where we get our Frostwolf Thrall skin and the Alterac Thrall skin that we have up on the screen right here, which, of course, the Frostwolf Thrall was originally from the one you could buy with the Book of Heroes. And I'm sure that they've been making those available randomly to purchase for gold at some point, so I'm sure it'll come around again. And of course, Alterac Thrall was part of the very first rewards track that came with the Darkmoon Fair. And so, yeah, that's where those fit in with the story in Thrall's journey right there. But eventually, he decides that he needs to go and free the orcs from being in a internment camp. He's going to forge a new horde, but one that's free of all this fell magic that corrupted his race. And this is essentially all the events that Thrall and the orcs go through in the game of Warcraft 3. We're not going to go through all the details here because, one, that would take too long. Two, it's really more of a Thrall story thing because the Frostwolves just pretty much stay put, honestly. Even after Thrall manages to unite the Orcish clans, along with a few other races like the Trolls and the Tauron, and forms the new horde, builds the city of Orgrimmar as the capital city and all of that, the Frostwolves are just kind of like, you know, we've really developed an attachment to Alterac Valley here, so, like, we'll be your allies and stuff. Call on us if you need any help, but, we think we're just going to stay put right here in this snowy, inhospitable place that we just took a real liking to. And
So what I'm hearing you say is that the Frostwolves are standing ready.
kind of. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. But it's also just that they want to live there, which I don't entirely understand because it's not like it's their ancestral home. They've been there for maybe 2-3 generations at the most, but they still feel like, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be. Probably the elemental spirits told us we're supposed to live here is a huge motivation for them to just want to stay put there. But that's essentially what the Frostwolves are doing there. And anyone have anything before we move on to the dwarves?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So, switching gears a bit here, the dwarves have not as much of a large backstory as to why they're there, as I mentioned at the start, but we do have a bit of backstory just to explain some things. So much like the Frostwolves, we have seen the word Stormpike here from the very beginning of Hearthstone. And once again, in case you're wondering, what the heck is a Stormpike? Just know, I've got the huge gun! And it's like, is that just like what dwarves do? Or what? Like, no, this is a very specific regiment of a specific clan of dwarves that are here in the snowy Alterac Mountains here. And so, once again, just like Frostwolf Run, Frostwolf Warlord, you finally get to learn what the heck is a Stormpike. And so, much like pretty much all dwarves, they have their headquarters, they're one of the many clans who lives in the capital city of Ironforge. They're a more minor clan. The three major clans are the Bronzebeard dwarves, who run Ironforge, the Wildhammers, who live out in some other areas. They're kind of like the very Scottish shaman dwarves who ride around on griffins and have throw lightning with their hammers and stuff. And so you might remember some of those types of thematic cards from the Descent of Dragons set. So that those were some Wildhammer dwarves there. Then of course there's the Dark Iron dwarves who end up living in Blackrock Mountain. But so those are like the three major clans. But the Stormpikes are a more minor clan who coexist in areas like Ironforge. And here, one key thing about dwarven culture is that they are really into archaeology. They're the race that founded the League of Explorers, which is based in Ironforge. So that's
cool.
where those come in. It eventually grew to expand to other races, of course, but it's primarily dwarves who make up the leadership and are the big enthusiasts of it, because they are actually descended from stone beings called earthen that were created by the Titans, but they lost their heritage. And so when they started to rediscover it and learn that there might be a connection between the origin of their race and the Titans, they wanted to learn more. And so they are just obsessed not only with the typical dwarves, mining and everything, because of course they mine, they craft, typical fantasy dwarven activities, but they also want to find lots of relics that will help them to understand where they came from. And it just so happens that Alterac Valley is a place where they think some of those relics might be. It's also a very resource-rich area, lots of iron, maybe some other good metals there, maybe some stone that they can use, but especially the relics. And so King Magni Bronzebeard sends out the Stormpike clan with an imperial decree to go and claim that area as an extension for the dwarven clans, just like Ironforge is. You can see from looking at Ironforge that this is an area this is a climate the dwarves are very accustomed to living into as well. They like the snowy mountain areas quite a bit themselves. And so that is the main reason that the Stormpike are there. They're there to try to have some archaeological aspects, to recover resources, and to expand into territory that they think is just a natural, rightful extension of the area that they already call home. There's not that much more information that we have. Obviously, Vandar is the leader of the Stormpikes. He is the clan chieftain there and the leader of the militia aspect that they have here. The main other fact that we know about the Stormpikes is that they have a particular bond, much like the Frostwolves have a bond with wolves. The Stormpikes, particularly, all dwarves have the racial mount is the ram, but the Stormpikes have a particular bond with theirs. In fact, one of the few little extra lore bits that we know is that they carve their identification into the horn of all the rams that they raise. And these rams are very sturdy beasts, very hardy. They make great mounts for mountainous and snowy terrain. And of course, if you're riding on them, it's really great where you can headbutt your enemies. If you remember Balf Ramshield from the Grand Tournament, he's a Hearthstone original character, but he represents quite a bit of that, a dwarf charging in on a ram as their racial mount there. And
Cool.
yeah, that's That's one of the main things. Dwarves are also a bit more of an engineering type of race. Not quite to the extent as gnomes. Gnomes are the really crazy, I can just invent sci-fi gadgets out of thin air with a can opener and a tinfoil hat. And presto, I have invented helicopters. But like literally, like gnomes invented airplanes and helicopters and a bunch of stuff. Yes. But like unlike gnomes, the dwarves are like not to that extent, but they do have a particular affinity with firearms compared to most of the other races. You know, it's like their, you know, boomsticks and blasting powder and all that type of stuff that you use to put a fantasy spin on guns. And so that's why, you know, they have like the Stormpike cards are often have, they have, you know, like I've got a huge gun, because that's kind of one of their specialties as a race and as a detachment in this particular area. So again, not as much to cover with the Frostwolves, but that's essentially what we know about the Stormpikes. And believe me, the articles that I've write about these are very unevenly balanced. One of them is super long. The other is like, I'm coming up with stuff to write here.
Yeah. So I know that the dwarves were going into Alterac Valley to kind of look for the resources and the, you know, things that belong in museums. But how close to Ironforge is Alterac Valley? Kind of were they exploring that way? Is it close or was it kind of a bit of a trek?
You know, I have to take a quick look at the map in order to refresh myself on that. Let's see.
Oh my gosh. I'm not stumped him, but like he had to look at something. I'm so proud.
Let's see.
Goliath is like he's a library of information on WoW. He used to always have everything, but you can't know. You can't know it all.
That's how I know it was a good question, right?
The finer points of some of the geography is a bit more of one of my weak spots. I will be perfectly honest on that point. Not that I don't know it at all. I know a lot of the general stuff, but I don't have all... I know the stories very well.
Yeah.
The maps memorized are not quite so much.
For sure.
There you go. Check the group chat.
Yeah. Well, that's a map of Alterac Valley itself right there, yeah. So that gives you a sense of, so you see we got the Alliance stuff at the top, we got the Horde base at the bottom, and that's going to come into play a bit more when we're talking about the way that the battleground itself works. But in terms of how close this would be to Ironforge itself, let's see, I've almost got something pulled up here. It's relatively close. I wouldn't say that they're like next door neighbors, but it makes sense that the dwarves would want to naturally expand into that area, honestly. Yeah, so there's a bit of distance here. I found a map, putting that in group chat right now. That'll give a sense if you want to put that up for everybody to see. So you can see that we have Ironforge listed out in a bit more of a slightly southern region, just a bit north of Stormwind. It's this purple area. But we have like a bit of crossing a bay in order to get over to the Alterac area. So like I said, it's not next door neighbors, but pretty reasonable sense that, hey, this area is very much like our home, and there's relics here, and yeah, as far as they know when they get there, they don't think anyone lives there. They don't know about the Frostwolves. The Frostwolves have been hiding from everybody. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're like, yeah, sure, why not go over here? And then we get to the conflict, because both of them think that the land is rightfully theirs for various reasons. In my opinion, both of those claims are questionable at best, because Frostwolves literally just kind of settled down there looking for a place to hide. It's not like, this has been my family home for 1,000 generations. And like, no, they just, you know, they moved there after participating in an invasion of the planet, I might add. So
not even your planet.
So I would say that throws their claim a bit into question. And for the Stormpikes, just like they're there in order to expand some territory that's not even next door and just claim some resources. So really, I'd say that both of them have about equal rights. because neither of them have very much of a strong claim, in my personal opinion. Just looking at their logic for that. However, that doesn't stop them from constantly duking it out over many, many years. Like canonically, like the battle for Alterac is constantly going on as a proxy war between the Alliance and the Horde in some fashion, which is kind of an explanation for why you can always queue into the battleground, no matter what expansion it is in World of Warcraft. Brand Bronzebeard theorized that the part of the initial dispute might have been a misunderstanding religiously, that because the orcs, with their shamanistic culture, very strongly venerate the spirits of their departed ancestors, so any graveyards they would have that the Stormpikes accidentally desecrated without knowing it, that infuriates the Frostwolves, like, how dare you disturb the resting place of our dead spirits, and we will destroy you for that. And the Stormpikes are like, we're here to learn about our ancestors, what are you talking about? And just constant misunderstandings, everyone refusing to yield, and all of them bringing in allies from the Alliance and the Horde in order to hold the ground in a battle that never really gains ground. It pushes, it pulls, but really it's a never-ending battle with no canonical winner. And that's the backstory to what's going on here. We got the Frostwolves, who are there because Orc Moses led them there. We have the Stormpikes, who are there because they want to learn about their connection with the Titans and get some resources and maybe expand their home a bit. And these guys just can't get along. And
Right.
like only one of us can live here. We are not being neighbors. We are not being flatmates. So someone has to leave. Someone has to die. And we're bringing in all our friends.
There you go.
And we'll get into the specifics of who those friends are and how the fight works out in part 2.
Absolutely. But one thing I think we did want to touch on, right, is how this interacts with our new characters, our mercenaries, right?
Right. So, as though the astute and observer, that's not a word.
Observer.
Yes, the astute observer might have noticed is that Rukara, our Orc Warrior mercenary representative, is from the Frostwolf clan. They really emphasize it. Every time you play her in mercenary, she's Frostwolves! And like it's her battle cry, and it's like literally her first lines when you play the book of Mary. She's like, I am from the Frostwolf clan. We are proud orcs. Or she follows a Frostwolf in their just not at all clunky writing that they do for these solo adventures.
It's not subtle at all.
Right. And so she's a representative from that clan and obviously takes a lot of pride in her clan, as those are her people. And then on the other side, we have Tavish Stormpike, who, you know, is a member of the Stormpike clan. And now the Stormpikes are, one thing I forgot to mention, they're a relatively almost aristocratic, kind of a wealthy, well-off clan. As Tavish mentions that that's only one side of the family. He's out being a mercenary because, like, you know, he has to make his own loot. He's not from the side of the family that has money. So these are Hearthstone original characters, but now you can see this is where they're coming from. This is how they are going to be bringing the year-long Year of the Griffin story into Alterac Valley. Obviously, we had the thing in the Book of Mercenary Stories where, like, it's about the chasing the Naru shards, and one of them is in Alterac Valley, so they're all going there. But I'm pretty sure the story is definitely going to lean into how Rokara and her Horde allies are going to want to fight to support her people. Tavish and his alliance allies are going to want to fight to support his people, and that's what's going to bring us into where each of them are joining in this battleground, this faction war right here. And I just really like how they managed to tie all that in together. It's one of the more clever things they've done with the story, in my opinion, just seeding that in right from the start.
Absolutely. I love hearing the story, and it's so neat to hear the Warcraft lore kind of adapted to the kind of, you know, newly created Hearthstone original characters, but how they still tie in together. And it just amazes me that you can play the game and totally miss out on all of the story behind it. And you're just like, cool, I got these cool characters, whatever. They do these neat things, but there's this so much depth there. I absolutely love it. So yeah, thank you for sharing the story with us. It's so great.
My pleasure. That's what I absolutely love about Hearthstone. It's why I get all excited when it's reveal season. One of my favorite times. I get 3 times a year, and okay, maybe technically 6 now that we have mini sets, but it's not the same. And you're like, oh, when I see this character got made to a card, I'm like, yes, because especially when they make it so that the card's effects reflect what they do in the story, which I'll say Drekthar and Vandars don't really. Those are just card mechanics right there. There's nothing particular about Vandar, who, if he is the smallest person around, he makes everybody more powerful. Or Drekthar, if he's the biggest around, he will pull people out. It's like that's not a story thing. That's a mechanic thing. But some cards do that, and I get really excited when they manage to match with the story. And it makes a lot more sense once you know the story to understand why the heck did they give the card this effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I think that this is a good potential segue to kind of pause on the show to play this parody song that you brought for us this week. And I'm excited. I'll actually be hearing it for the first time. I was swamped all week and I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet. And so we're going to...
I plan on doing that at some point once I can figure out what a good topic is to parody with Never Gonna Give You Up. You have been warned. I will do that someday, but you don't know when. Remember, everyone was talking about the dust refunds a little while ago at the start of the show. That happens to be our little topic right here. If anyone is a fan of the band Kansas, I think that you'll recognize and like this one.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and play it then.
I close my eyes, press the button just like that, the card is gone. The card's no good. Use the arcane dust to craft a better dusting. Always arcane dusting the sick. The cards are sure you'll never play and never need. All your cards disenchanted for a new deck to succeed. Dusting the card, always arcane dusting, crafted by the whales and dusted by you. Dusting the always arcane dusting the card. Everyone is dusting the card.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
That was your face.
I love it. That's so great.
Glad you liked it.
That was amazing. I'm so impressed. That was great. I laughed at the best. Like you're so funny, and at the same time you were like on pitch too. Like you actually,
it's so good.
It sounds great, and it was hilarious all at the same time. I had a smile on my face throughout the entire thing.
So good.
I'll give credit to Sheep for the idea of using the word whale in there. I wouldn't have done it on a risk of maybe being offensive at all, but you're the one who brought it up, so I thought, what the heck, I'll throw it in here.
I love it.
I'm glad I could inspire that part, but oh my gosh, complete kudos your way, because
Thank you.
I may have inspired that bit, but you wrote it and put it in the correct meter and pitch, and oh my gosh, that's incredible. Thank you.
Playing with the words is really fun for me because trying to figure out, okay, what's a word that's close enough to the originals but is related to the topic. It's a really fun challenge I enjoy.
Oh, it's so much fun.
That's the part I kind of miss about doing the parody songs is like sometimes you feel so proud of yourself when when you make it work.
We'll get
I don't have the monopoly on them. Feel free to write more whatever you want.
inspiration will hit soon, I'm sure.
It was just so hard doing it every single week.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Hey, well, I think this is a good time. I'm really curious. Before we move on to the next segment of the show, Goliath had mentioned that he had kind of a prediction to make about the upcoming mini set, which of course is quite a ways away. And so I think it's even more fun to make the prediction now since we're so early. And I want to hand the mic over to Goliath to go ahead and make this prediction here.
Right. So I'm going to see if I can give a bit of a prophecy right here, because this is going to require just a bit of explanation in order to understand my logic. So what this year-long story with the mercenaries has been doing, and Blizzard has said this themselves, is that it's very much kind of capturing that initial Warcraft player experience. You have these mercenaries that are representing all of the different player classes, plus Demon Hunter, which didn't exist back then. But aside from that, so like all these different things that you could be, and it's been following their progress very realistically from that perspective in two different ways. One is the art. If you may have noticed, when you look at the different versions of the characters and some of the other characters as well, like the adventurers from Wailing Caverns and maybe a couple other cards in the various different sets, their armor changes and it reflects the exact armor sets that players could get at various stages of the game as they level up. So it's very clearly like a tracking their progress. This includes the armor that the mercenaries are wearing in their new hero cards, which is tier sets that you would get kind of around that same level that you would be getting into Alterac. Which leads to the second thing which they've been doing is they've been amping up the type of content through the set themes that you would progress through. So you start out in the Barrens. The Barrens is literally a starting spawning zone, one of the first zones that if you're Horde that you would play through, until then you would get to a capital city. Switching factions, that capital city is now Stormwind, which is a place for you to gear up, serves as a hub, a place for you to return to before you go out into the more advanced zones for your leveling and your questing. Once you get sufficiently leveled up and are a bit more in endgame type of stuff, then you're going to get into being eligible for the large-scale PvP like Alterac Valley. And so it's been following the progression of a player in that sense and also in the art sense. I think merging those two together, there is only one logical place where I think this is going. From a story perspective with the mercenaries, we have been seeing how everything is being manipulated by two dragons. One of them, Kazakis, Hearthstone original character, all the way back from Gadget-san, disguised as a troll, who is manipulating things on the Horde side. The other is the very canonical, in the lore, Black Dragon, who has infiltrated and manipulating the Alliance under the guise of the noblewoman Lady Prestor. And within the Hearthstone story, they are working together in their diabolical scheme in order to accumulate the power here. And we still have to bring this year-long story to a conclusion where it only makes sense where we would face off against the puppet masters behind this whole thing. Now, not the first raid in World of Warcraft. The very first one was Molten Core where you're fighting against Ragnaros. But one of the earlier ones was called Onyxia's Lair, where you fight and kill Onyxia. And so if we follow it from this story perspective of how they're matching it with the mercenaries and that this has to have some sort of big grand gear story finale in order to tie everything together, and we are following the progression of a player where first you have a starting zone, you have a capital city, you have endgame PvP, one of the biggest things that you could say as a finale towards what you can do unlocking new content is a raid. And so I think that Onyxia's lair is going to be the general theme. They might tweak things a bit in order to throw Kazakus in or whatnot, but I think that is going to be the general theme of the mini set. It's not going to be additional, plus more stuff in Alterac Valley, like Darkmoon Races was extension of Darkmoon Thayer, Wailing Caverns was extension of the Barrens and all that. I think it's going to be something completely different in order to serve as a final capsule to finish off the story. Now, it's possible I could be wrong, and I could decide to just have everything come to a head with Onyxia and Kazakus in Alterac Valley, kind of the way that they did for the Rise of Galakron, the first mini set that was in the same thing as Descent of Dragons. But for me, if I were the one who was writing and designing this, it just makes the most logical sense following the two progression styles that my prediction, it's going to be the first one I get wrong because it's the most bold, but my prediction right now is that Onyxia's Lair will be the mini set that finishes off the Year of the Griffin and the year-long mercenary story before they decide, they've announced that they're going to go back to the single standalone expansions for a little while before they do another year-long story.
I like
to
it.
give this one a high cap.
Hey, they've been hinting at it pretty hard with the artwork and even the Mercenaries game mode. A lot of the solo content or the PvE content is pretty light story-wise, but it's been, Kazakus and Prestor, and even in the promo artwork, like they're working together. And like you see on the screen here, you've got like the Mercenaries against Prestor and Kazakus, so it makes a lot of sense to me. So I think you're onto something. I like it.
Yeah. If you remember the announcement song trailer for Mercenaries, you got like, oh, we plotted and planned. Well, what else do we have to do? We need some mercs to do our dirty work, and it launches into the trailer. But they've been peppering this throughout all the promotional material this year. It has to come to a head at some point.
Bold prediction. Excellent. I love it.
I've got a question. Which raid were they on with the whole Leroy Jenkins thing and all the whelps came out?
That was a Blackrock Mountain raid, if I remember correctly. I think Blackrock Spire, I believe, is the one that has all. That's the dragon themed one with all the whelps. No, I'm sorry, not Onyxia's Lair. Onyxia's Lair is a bit more of a, I think it's a single boss dungeon. I'd have to recheck on that. I think it's basically just fighting Onyxia. But she's quite the boss herself.
Onyxia summons whelps, so I was just curious.
Right, yeah. No, that not an illogical guess, no.
So per the internet, Leroy Jenkins, where that went down was Upper Blackrock Spire's Rookery. So Blackrock Spire.
Yeah. That's the specific zone of that raid.
Exactly. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, bold prediction. I guess we'll see. Time will tell if you're right, and if you are, we'll have to come up with some sort of prize. I love it. I think this is great. And I think you've got a good chance at it. I think you've been right multiple times before, so you've got a lot of credibility with us.
Well, one of the reasons I do grow my hair like I do is I want to look like an old prophet when I get old or something. So I'm training in a few different ways to be prophet.
Well, I especially like how this one is like a little bit, the other ones were right next to it, right? Like intuitive. This one's more that kind of bold. It makes complete logical sense.
I have no data points to back this up or anything,
Yeah. So I'm excited to see where that goes, and I hope you're right so that we get to pony up a prize.
Absolutely.
And that would be like if we got a new card, that would be our fourth Onyxia card, because we have the original Onyxia card, the core set dragon one, and we have her as Lady Prestor now. So if we got a new one, that would be Onyxia number 4. I think that would catch her up with Deathwing cards, actually.
Yeah, she and Deathwing.
Father like daughter.
Hey.
I'd be okay with it. I like Onyxia.
Good deal. Well, I can't wait to see whether you're right or wrong. But before we kind of wrap up the show tonight in general, I think we get to look into, speaking of challenges, last week's weekly listener challenge.
Yes.
So last week's challenge was Frozen in Alterac. So the challenge was to generate as many legendary minions as possible using Murabi. So you didn't have to play them, they could still be in your hand, but we wanted to see how many were generated by Murabi. And our winner this week was Schmoopy Daddy.
Yay,
So
Schmoopy Daddy!
Schmoopy! Yay!
Woo!
Look at that
So
hand.
Schmoopy.
Wow.
Got, let's see, what all you got? Cookie, Zentimo, Grumble, all from Murabi. So Schmoopy,
Ooh.
congratulations. You win, of course, the ever-coveted bragging rights, which includes being featured on the Hall of Fame on the website, borntobewildhs.com, and 2 packs on us. Congratulations, Schmoopy Daddy.
Well done. Hooray! I'm thinking about when you win the match. Hooray!
Exactly. Whenever I do that, that's exactly what I'm referencing.
Nice.
So that was last week's challenge, which Schmoopy Daddy valorously conquered. What is this week's challenge, Goliath?
So, seeing as we are, in our first week of the Alterac expansion, which is very faction conflict themed, we're going to have a little bit of a deck building challenge with that specific thing in mind. We've had a few challenges along this style in the past, like if I recall correctly, there was a previous one about making a warrior deck that had just undead themed minions in it. We're going to do something a bit similar here, where your challenge, and mine as well I guess, is to make a deck that is themed with only minions who belong to the same faction. So this can be Alliance or Horde, and we are just going to go with the more common races here and the ones who are members of these factions at the time that this is taking place, so we don't have to get into like, okay, technically like this race was added on like 10 billion expansions into the game or whatnot. We're going to talk about the core stuff here. So these are essentially the races that the different mercenaries are. So for Horde, this will be Orcs, Trolls, Tauron, Blood Elves, Goblins. There's not a Goblin mercenary, but they are a part of this. And let's see. I know I'm forgetting something. I'm blanking. Let's see, let's run through all the mercenaries. We have Rikara, who's the Orc. We have Guff, who's the Tauron. We have Dawngrasp, who is the Blood Elf. We have, I can't remember the troll's name. Brukan, is it? Brukan,
Yeah.
that's how you pronounce it, yeah. He's the troll and the shaman right there. And, oh, of course, Undead Forsaken, Tamsin.
There we go.
That's what I was briefly forgetting right there. Yes, so for Horde, if you're making a Horde deck, they can only be cards who are depicting Orcs, Tauron, Trolls, Undead, Goblins, or Blood Elves. That gives you 6 different things there. So if it's Alliance, then it can only be cards that are depicting humans, dwarves, gnomes, worgen, Draenei, and Night Elves. And so those are the core races there. And so the thing is, we're also going to include spell art here. So not just the minions, but also spells with the images. That's a requirement too, so that those aren't excluded. And the really tricky thing is you need to make a deck that is actually viable. You need to post a screenshot. So give us your deck list and post one of you actually winning a game with this deck. And I would say that one of the qualifiers here is, I'd say that'll give you an edge the more members of a single race you can manage to squeeze in there. Like, it's perfectly valid to do a bit of all of them, but you'll have a better chance of winning if you can get even more card count that is art depicting on spells and minions from one single race. And then we'll make a decision from there based just off of how cool it is with the results of all that, I suppose.
Excellent.
Cool.
Good deal. And of course, as always, the challenge can be done on ladder or in casual. If you don't want to tank your rank, I wouldn't blame you. But it cannot be done against a friend, the innkeeper, or other PvE content. Your friend will let you in. The innkeeper won't try to, but he'll let you win too. And so will the other PvE content. Take a screenshot. And of course, you put your deck list in our Discord in the weekly challenge section. So we will share the winner on to next week's show, just like we did with Schmoopy Daddy tonight. The winner, just like Schmoopy, gets 2 packs on us and, of course, bragging rights on our website, borntobewildhs.com/Hall of Fame.
Excellent. I am looking forward to whatever kind of crazy things y'all can come up with. It's always fun to get people participating in these. And so very much looking forward to it. And that about wraps up our show for tonight. Thank you all for being here and participating, hanging out with us. It is always a blast. For more wild content, or to see where you can find us individually, visit us online at www.borntobewildhs.com. You want to tune in next week. Our topic of the week, we will be discussing new wild decks from the first 2 weeks of Fractured and Alterac. And that being said, we'll see you next week on another new episode of Born to Be Wild. Yay!
Yay.